Welcome to Nuked Radio. This is episode 85. Today is Tuesday, January the 15th, 2013. I'm your host, Christina Consolo. With me today is Jules. Also, I'm being job shadowed by a high school student named Ian, a senior from Almont High School. Everyone say hi to Ian. He'll also be hanging out in chat today. Now, if you missed Thursday's show, we interviewed Major William B. Fox. The show is available in the archives and on YouTube. It's called Military/MSN Insider Talks Fukushima Cover-Up. There's been lots of good comments so far. I think 1,300 people have listened to it, and it's being very well received. I also got an email from the father of one of the U.S. Navy sailors who was on the USS Ronald Reagan and is part of the lawsuit against the Japanese government, thanking the Rad Chick page for all the info and support. I extended an invitation to him and his daughter Lindsay to come on the show and share their story with us. Now, there's also two important broadcasts happening today that I wanted to let you guys know about. Patrick Penry will be on from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. This is part 2 of his NRC Freedom of Information Act document review. And Loren Murray will be on the Raw feed from Blog Talk Radio on GLP tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The topic is population control. And besides all the news about Sandy Hook, guns, and ammo this past weekend, the topic probably most discussed was the weather. Here in Michigan, we got up to 60 over the weekend, and now it's 23. Along with that warm weather, though, came some rain. And our good friend from Eastern Ontario, the Firebomb Clipper, uploaded a YouTube video reminding us that some of that rain was hot. Another place that's getting some hot snow is Japan. This was posted on wonderground.com. Heaviest snow in 7 years strikes Tokyo. The heaviest snowstorm in 7 years struck Tokyo on Monday, causing thousands of car accidents and disrupting train travel just as the nation celebrated a unique national holiday. The Coming of Age Day, held the second Monday of every January, celebrates those who have turned or are about to turn 20 years old. Ceremonies and parties are held in communities across Japan, and the newly minted adults often wear traditional kimono for the occasion. But with the wind-driven snow flying in the Japanese capital on Monday, getting around proved difficult. Roads were clogged with slush, and the country's extensive rail network experienced delays. The snow was the first of this winter for Tokyo. Strong winds accompanied the wet, gloppy snow. Gusts 53 miles per hour at Haneda Airport in Tokyo led to flight delays and cancellations. Tokyo's Narita International Airport said 3,400 travelers spent the night in the terminal after 71 flights were canceled. Operations returned to normal Tuesday except for a few delays, according to the Associated Press. One man died due to a motorcycle accident in Ibaraki Prefecture, and another died while cleaning snow in Nagano Prefecture. In addition, almost 1,600 people were injured in car accidents and falls on slick pavement, according to the Japanese broadcaster NHK. The JMA reported 8 centimeters or 3.1 inches of snow in central Tokyo. The Pacific Coast city, whose climate resembles that of the southeastern U.S., averages about 4 inches of snow per year. According to Fuji TV, it was central Tokyo's heaviest snowfall in 7 years. The nearby port city of Yokohama received 5 inches of snow, its largest amount in 12 years. Other parts of Japan received much larger totals, including 8 inches in Sendai in northern Japan and 16 inches in the mountains of Yamanashi Prefecture west of Tokyo. In contrast, much of northern Japan has experienced persistent cold weather in recent weeks, and the typical sea effect snows on the opposite Sea of Japan side of the country have left over 8 feet of snow on the ground in parts of the interior mountains, which is not unusual for mid-January. Now, the storm responsible for Tokyo's snow has since moved east and out to sea, but has strengthened explosively over the waters of the North Pacific. Meteorologists at NOAA's Ocean Prediction Center warned of a significant and extremely dangerous low-pressure system with the potential for a large area of hurricane-force winds over the open sea. NOAA said that its Wave Watch 3 model projections indicated the potential for waves taller than 60 feet as the storm matures well east of Japan and well south of Alaska's Aleutian Islands. The storm's central pressure plummeted to 932 millibars by By early Tuesday, a drop of 33 millibars in just 18 hours, easily meeting the criteria for a meteorological bomb, so-called when a storm experiences a rapid drop in central pressure. It's usually 24 millibars or more in 24 hours. By comparison, Superstorm Sandy's minimum central pressure went no lower than 940 millibars, though it was much closer to land when that occurred. Meteorologists following a storm's central pressure with great interest because the storm's wind energy is strongly related to its central pressure. Also, over the weekend, there was a rare photo of the mushroom cloud over Hiroshima that was discovered in a former Japanese elementary school. This was published in The Atlantic by Rebecca Rosen. Also, I dropped a link into chat so you guys can check out these pictures. In the center of Hiroshima and a part of the city totally destroyed by the explosion and ensuing fires, a long-lost photograph taken shortly after the blast has been discovered among a collection of articles about the bombing. The picture is a rare glimpse of the bomb's immediate aftermath, showing the distinct two-tiered cloud as it was seen from Kaitachi, part of the present-day Kaita, 6 miles east of Hiroshima Center. Reprints of the image did appear in a 1988 Japanese language publication, but the whereabouts of the original were unknown. There are only a couple of other photos in existence, 2, possibly 3, that capture the cloud from the vantage point of the ground. And according to the Japanese paper Ashi Shimbun, there is only one other photograph that provides as clear a picture of the separated tiers of the cloud, and that is a photo taken from the Enola Gay as it zipped away. AFP reports about the recently recovered photo point to a bit of confusion over when exactly it was taken. On the back of the photo, a note puts the time at 2 minutes after the blast. But in the 1988 book, in which the picture was reprinted, the editors placed it 20 to 30 minutes later. Would it be possible to assess the validity of these conflicting figures based solely on the evidence in the picture? I reached out to American Institute of Physics nuclear historian Alex Wellerstein to see if a more definitive answer was possible. He compared the image to other photos whose timestamps were more or less known, as well as to a chart prepared by Manhattan Project scientists depicting the cloud's progression. In looking at those, he said, it looks like it was taken slightly after another photo, which is supposed to be the cloud at about 20,000 feet. That elevation, 20,000 feet, would have reached about 2 to 3 minutes after the explosion, and this picture was taken slightly after that. There are photos taken about 10 minutes after which show that the cloud is a really different shape at that point. He continued, based on that timeline, he places this picture somewhere within the 2 to 5 minute window and rules out the 20 to 30 minute window. There's a diagram too of how they assess that, taken from the Manhattan Engineer District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. As you look at the photo, your mind inevitably turns to the people below. What was it like in those first few minutes after the bomb? I asked Wellerstein and he replied, most of the direct effects of the bomb are going to be delivered in the first 10 seconds or so, and a lot of them faster than that. You've already got the first thing that happens, which is this huge amount of radiation and heat. Anybody who's exposed to radiation might not die instantly, but they're going to die pretty soon, within a week or so. The heat is going to give people third-degree burns within a fairly wide radius. A few seconds later, there's this huge pressure blast. It's like a big puff of air. It blows in all the windows. It tips over the little stoves they use for cooking breakfast. This happens at 8:15 or so in the morning, so it tips over all those little tiny charcoal stoves. So by a couple of minutes, you've got the beginnings of a very large fire. It's not yet at a firestorm. That happens pretty soon afterward. But you've got all these little tiny fires started either by the heat of the bomb itself or by the fact that all these fire sources are knocked over and these Japanese houses are all made out of wood and paper. And as bad as that is, the worst was yet to come. From a couple of minutes after and continuing for several hours, everything is on fire. Everyone is confused. A lot of people are dead. A lot of people are dead but don't know it yet. They've been exposed to fatal amounts of radiation. So it's pretty bad on the ground at that time. As the fire spreads, the wind picks up, creating tornado-like conditions which, as Father John A. Seams, a Catholic priest living at the Novatite of the Society of Jesus in Natsuku, about 2 kilometers away, later remembered, it began to uproot large trees and lifts them high into the air. For people trapped in that chaos, no one could possibly have understood that all of this destruction came from one single bomb. Everyone thought they themselves must have been very close to where the bomb hit. Father Seams, who was 2 kilometers away, recalled seeing a flash of light and then hearing an explosion. About 10 seconds after the light, I am sprayed by fragments of glass. The entire window frame has been forced into the room. I realize now that a bomb has burst, and I'm under the impression that it exploded directly over our house or in the immediate vicinity. Yet even given the delay between the flash of light, the sound, and the explosion, Seams and his colleagues went to the front of the house to see where the bomb landed. All of the survivors he later encountered had the same impression that the bomb had burst in their immediate vicinity. The fact that one massive bomb kilometers away could cause this sort of force and devastation defied belief. Everybody's running around saying, "Oh, it's weird, my house randomly got hit by a bomb," Wellerstein describes it, when the answer is no, 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 you guys are actually fairly far away from the bomb, and it was only one bomb. It was huge. I've always thought that that was a powerful illustration of how long it takes your brain to wrap around something that's just so unfamiliar, he continued. The person who took this photo would have been among the first to look out there and realize that this just wasn't your run-of-the-mill bomb. It wasn't the air raid that the citizens of Hiroshima had been anticipating for months. This was the beginning of a new world, one with a bomb unlike anything else ever experienced before, something so new and fearsome that at first no one could understand what it was. And if that wasn't bad enough, we dropped another one on Nagasaki a few weeks later. Also, over the weekend, there were more booms reported, this time in South Carolina. Some background on South Carolina faults and earthquakes appears on the southcarolina.gov page. And there's also been quite a few reports of shaking in the area. Background: the Palmetto State has a seismic past and will no doubt tremble again as quakes shake the ground beneath our feet. Earthquakes are not an uncommon occurrence in South Carolina. The South Carolina Geological Survey, SCGS, is interested in making South Carolinians aware of our seismic past, what causes our earthquakes, what is being done to reduce the losses that will result from future quakes, and what you should do before, during, and after an earthquake. Now they have an earthquake guide, earthquakes and seismic waves information. There's a brochure that you can download. I'll drop the link into chat and attach it under the YouTube video. Another article about the booms appeared in the Standard Examiner by Mark Saul. This was posted Saturday, January 12th. Listen, just because they call it a conspiracy theory doesn't mean it isn't true. Take last week. While I can't prove it, I know our government was involved in a massive cover-up of some sort. How do I know this? Because they keep denying everything and changing their story. And if there's one thing 30 years of journalism has taught me, aside from where to get the cheapest haircuts in town, it's this: anytime someone in authority tells you there isn't a problem, there's a problem. It all started Tuesday night when friends on Facebook posted about hearing and feeling 2 rumbling, booming sounds. Friends from Alpine to Kaysville and everywhere in between say the 2 noises shook doors and rattled windows. The next day, media outlets reported the sounds were heard all over the northern half of the state. Initially, nobody took credit, and predictably, all of the usual suspects went out of their way to insist that they had nothing to do with it. Seismologists at the University of Utah said it wasn't an earthquake. ATK said it wasn't testing any rocket motors. And Hill Air Force Base said there weren't any military aircraft making noises that night. And then, almost as quickly as they denied it, the Air Force changed its tune. It turns out, they say, that some B-52 Stratofortress bombers from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana were conducting bombing runs at the Utah Test and Training Range in the West Desert that night. And because of the temperature inversion, the noises could be heard all along the Wasatch Front. Oh sure, the Air Force says the noise was bombing runs in the West Desert, but we all know the Air Force doesn't exactly have a great track record when it comes to leveling with the American public. Project Blue Book, anyone? Besides, my sources say they heard 2 distinct booms, 2 people, What, our government expects us to believe that these bombers from Louisiana flew 1,500 miles to Utah when clearly the Bayou State offers plenty of more conveniently located places that could have been bombed in good conscience, dropped a total of 2 bombs, and then decided to call it a night and head back home? And that's the story they're sticking with? I'm telling you something fishy is going on around here, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. So who do you call when you've got an unexplained boom in this old world? I'll tell you who, a physicist. That's right, you can have all of your so-called pseudosciences. For my money, when you need answers, go with physicists. They're slightly less nerdy than biologists, and unlike chemists, they don't have to memorize the periodic table of the elements. So I emailed the folks in the physics department at Weber State University to find out what went down on Tuesday. Uncharacteristically, they tried to stonewall me. Uh-oh, something sinister was going on here. Professor John Armstrong insisted he was in Texas at the time of the concussive noises. Professor Stan Palin attempted to deflect suspicion with humor. I heard rumbling and assumed that our science building had finally fallen down. I briefly worried about the asbestos and toxic fume cloud that must surely result, but since the prevailing wind is away from my house, I just went to bed. Well played, Dr. Palin. But it was another WSU professor, Dan Schroeder, who finally let it slip. Yeah, I heard the rumbling. I assumed it was just one of our technicians in his secret volcano lair preparing a new lecture demonstration for Dr. Johnson's class. Dr. Johnson, of course, being WSU physics Professor Adam Johnston, who claims to know nothing about the events of Tuesday night last. I'm unequivocally certain, however, that it had absolutely nothing to do with any alleged demonstration being developed for one of my courses, as Dr. Schroeder has irresponsibly suggested. Then Professor J inadvertently let it slip. By the way, sometime you should come by to see the brand new quantum plasma transmorphifilator we just built. It packs quite a punch. Bring goggles, maybe a change of clothes. Ha! So there you have it, a mysterious sound solved. It was the university's quantum plasma transmorphifilator. How do I know this? Because when you type it into Google, you get nothing. No hits, no suggestions, not even, did you mean quantum plasma transistor radio? The only thing that pops up is your search did not match any documents. And if that's not a massive cover-up, I don't know what is. Now, a few folks had emailed me about the booms that they heard, and one of them provided a link to plasma weapons, and perhaps this is something that we could call Loren about when she's on tonight, because I understand there is going to be a call-in section of her interview. A plasma weapon is any theoretical firearm designed to use plasma or a high-energy ionized gas as a weapon. The plasma is typically intended to be created by superheating lasers or super-frequency devices. Such weapons can be intended to be lethal, causing death by serious burns or the melting of targets, or non-lethal and intended to disrupt electronics using an EMP. And then it says, while no practical example of such weaponry has been produced, corporations such as Boeing have funded research and development into the technology. The practicality of plasma weapons. At present, plasma weapons are merely theoretical, as currently they need more power than any handheld device could supply. If small portable fusion reactors are made, one potential source of weapons-grade plasma sources might be a direct tap on a fusion reactor, especially a dense plasma focus, since the natural yield of such a reactor is a hot, high-speed plasma beam. Making real plasma weapons will need a major scientific breakthrough, as the concept of plasma-firing weapons is scientifically difficult for various reasons. And it goes on to list what those reasons are: that the particle beams are too bulky for anything that would be portable. It would have to be highly focused and magnetic, such as the technology used in NASA's Vasamer rocket. The plasma shot out of a plasma weapon would tend to dissipate in the surrounding environment within about 50 centimeters from the gun, called blooming, unless it was magnetically confined. So I'll drop this into chat for any of you guys who want more information about plasma weapons. And it says also see pulsed energy projectile, plasma torch, plasma antenna, a pesotron, and a list of plasma or physics articles. But nothing about this new machine that they had talked about at the physics center. And another story that generated quite a bit of discussion on the Radchick page was some bad news from the Atlantic. A third beached whale in a month washed up in New York yesterday. And, you know, some of the things being said is, could it be from Navy sonar? I doubt it, because the whale was, one of the whales was covered in lesions. You know, it's possible that they've been contaminated from one of the various oil spills that happened after Sandy, or sewage dumps that occurred at some of the sewage treatment plants, or some of the releases from the 5 or 6 nuke plants that were affected by the storm. I do want to remind you guys, though, about the whales, that in the first few weeks after Fukushima, there were 6 radioactive whales that were found, 2 in Japan, 4 in China and Russia. And they were highly radioactive because they fed on plankton that had absorbed radiation from the fallout around the Fukushima plant. And it seems like a big jump in the food chain, but normally it goes small animal to large, but since whales feed on plankton, it would directly affect them. And one poster had said that there had been a few other beached whales in the past few weeks in the Carolinas and in Georgia, and a quick search showed that that was true, and also in Florida. I'll read this one article from the Long Island Newsday: 2 whales wash up on East Hampton beaches. This was published January 13th by Laura Figueroa. 2 whales, 1 dead and 1 later euthanized, washed up on separate stretches of East Hampton beaches on Sunday, just hours apart from one another. Scientists with the Riverhead Foundation for Marine Research and Preservation are trying to determine the cause of death for a 59-foot-long female finback whale discovered, and a 5-foot-long juvenile pygmy sperm whale that was found in Amagansett. The other article appeared, let's see, a rare 26-foot right whale is discovered dead just south of Varn Park. That's in Florida, and the date on that article is December 19th. And another whale in South Carolina near Low County Beach, washed up dead. This was posted December the 6th, and it wasn't the only one. Beaufort County, a pilot whale that was stranded Thursday morning on the beach at Hunting Island State Park has died. NOAA workers worked to remove the 16-foot whale, which is located on the island at the foot of the Fripp Island Bridge, according to the island packet. The whale is one of 4 pilot whales that have been stranded around the Low County coast. There was another stranded whale near Pritchard's Island, and another died Tuesday on Edisto Beach. So I know you guys will all feel better knowing that NOAA is on top of this. Today, posted in the Extinction Protocol, World Still Grappling with Epidemic of Sinkholes, there's a Chinese village that suffered for over 20 sinkholes in 5 months. And there's a nice picture of one here on the page. Residents in the village of Linyuan in southern China's Hunan province have been treading rather gingerly these last few months. Over 20 sinkholes have opened up in the ground since last September. The cave-ins, which ranged in size, have seen houses collapse and rivers run dry, and there is never any warning as to where and when the sinkholes occur. According to local authorities, the main reason for the cave-ins is the number of coal mines in the area. It is not clear what steps are being taken to prevent further sinkholes from happening. And there's also a couple of videos attached of some of the larger ones. And I get requests for information on the Bayou Corn Sinkhole all the time. And I want to remind everyone that Alicia Heelig runs a Facebook page called Bayou Corn Sinkhole, where she posts any and all information. In fact, she has been also utilizing Facebook to reach other radio hosts and other alternative news sites to cover this story as well. This appeared in Tree Hugger today by Michael Graham Richard. Mystery sinkhole threatens Bayou Corn, Louisiana. There are so many environmental disasters at any given time that sometimes it gets a bit depressing. Some are natural, others are caused by humans, and some are more mysterious. Few make it to the front page of the New York Times, although many probably should. Or they should at least get a bit more attention and investigation by experts. One such occurrence that's been flying mostly under the radar so far is the Bayou Corn sinkhole in Louisiana. It's about 45 miles south of Baton Rouge, and after opening up in early August, it has grown to be at least 8 acres in size, filling up with water, underground brines, oil, and natural gas from deep below the surface. This forced the evacuation of 300 residents of the nearby town Assumption. 4 months later, officials continue to tell residents that they do not know when they will be able to return home. A few have chosen to ignore the order and have stayed in their homes, but the neighborhood is now quiet and nearly vacant. Some cleanup has started, but pollutants have already contaminated nearby waterways. Many residents are blaming mining company Texas Brine, saying that one of their production holes below collapsed and caused the sinkhole to form. The company denies responsibility. The video above was sent to us by Alicia Heelig. Thanks, Alicia. For another angle, there's a flyover video shot from a helicopter available here. Mike Ludwig at Truth Out has a great write-up, as does our friend George Dvorsky at IO9. And what you will maybe see a little bit more of as this situation drags on is residents sending in letters that are getting published. And this letter appeared today in the Advocate from a registered nurse who lives in Bayou Corn. Letter: sinkhole problem needs resolving. As a Bayou Corn resident, I personally am sick of seeing our no-show governor and our state of Louisiana just sitting back and laying all of this on Texas Brine. There is no doubt in my mind that the cause of all of this is Texas Brine's failed cavern, but we must all not forget that our very own Louisiana Department of Natural Resources was well aware of this breached cavern back in January of 2011 and did nothing about it but slide it under the rug with no monitoring or consideration of potential problems that we are now facing as a result of that lack of action on the part of the LDNR under the direction of Joe Ball and James Walsh. Our state can sit back all day, every day, and hand out mandates and fines to Texas Brine, but the reality is the situation is not getting resolved, and pointing fingers and flexing muscles is not helping the people of the Bayou Corn community, the residents of Assumption Parish, or the environment utilized and enjoyed by many residents of Louisiana in general. The impact of this disaster is not just a local problem. Folks come here from all over to hunt, fish, boat ride, ski, sightsee, camp, eat, and buy seafood. People's health is being affected, whether physical or mental. Livelihoods are affected. Wildlife is affected. Tourism is affected. Culture is affected. And all of that has a direct effect on the state of Louisiana. If Texas Brine is, for whatever reason, unable to contain and resolve this problem, then it's time for the state of Louisiana to step up and help us get this problem resolved and deal with the finger pointing and recouping of financial losses later. The problem needs to be corrected, and if the state needs to help Texas Brine correct it, then that's what the state needs to do. It's our community, and our community is in Bobby Jindal's state. Governor Jindal has to see that this problem is bigger than Texas Brine. He and the state of Louisiana need to get involved in the repair rather than just sit back and direct and levy fines. They need to help Texas Brine resolve this problem. Some other earth changes going on. There was a real interesting one. I have a link for it I'll have to pull up about a new island that formed off Germany. Also appearing in the extinction protocol today, heightened activity at Italy's Stromboli volcano frightens residents. Spectacular lava flows and smoke from an active volcano on the Italian island of Stromboli on Monday sparked fear among inhabitants, but geophysicists said the situation was under control. Stromboli is part of the seven-island Ionian archipelago just off Sicily in southern Italy. The volcano is active, but on Monday there was a particularly powerful eruption and sustained lava flows following 4 days of heightened activity. Stromboli Mayor Marco Giorgiani told the island's 500 inhabitants that they were not at risk, and experts from Italy's Civil Protection Agency are due on the island for further control shortly. "We are afraid," one resident, Paolo Sincata, was quoted by the ANSA news agency as saying, "No one has really explained to us what the situation is and what we should do. Italy's National Geophysics Institute is monitoring the situation." The New Zealand volcano is also restless. There's an article about that. And let me see if I have the one from Germany. Yes, this was posted on January 12th. An island the size of 25 football pitches has appeared seemingly out of nowhere off the coast of Germany. The landmass, which is composed of sandbanks, gradually emerged from the violent waters off the North Sea over the past few years. It lies 24 kilometers off the coast of Schleswig-Holstein in Germany's far north in a stretch of coastline known as the Wattenmeer, a marine national park. Nature lovers noticed the appearance of Bird Island, named after the seabirds who rest, nest, or feed on the sand dunes that are now almost 5 meters high. Winds blew seeds from across Europe, and 49 species of plants have now been detected on it. The head of the national park said, "This is, for us conservationists, anything but ordinary." So it sounds like that's been going on for a couple of years now. And over to Fukushima, we have less than 2 months before the 2-year anniversary, which will be the 1-year anniversary for this show. And so over the next 2 months, we're going to be doing a series of interviews, and we'll be having several special guests, with the focus being on solutions. And one very disheartening bit of news that came out over the past week has been the crooked cleanup efforts going on at Fukushima. There's a number of articles that have been posted about this subject, and I know Arnie Gunderson has weighed in on it as well. The slipshod organization of the mammoth decontamination program around the stricken Fukushima nuclear plant created an environment where cutting corners came naturally and morals and ethics quickly slipped away, workers said. They have cited a lack of training, unreasonable deadlines, threats of isolation, and persistent feelings that their efforts were pointless. "When I first entered the work area, I could not believe that I was involved in a state-run project," a 50-year-old worker said in an email. Ashai Simbaum reporters and the company have received more than 100 emails and phone calls from people involved in the decontamination project in Fukushima Prefecture. They were responding to the newspaper's report on January 4th that workers were dumping potentially contaminated soil, water, and debris into the environment instead of properly storing it for disposal. Many of those messages and calls showed the workers felt that they were not doing anything inappropriate under the circumstances. "We were pressed to finish the work as quickly as possible," wrote the 50-year-old worker who was involved in decontaminating Tamura between November 5th and December 28th. "If we tried to resist, we would become isolated from other workers, although it did not reach the extent of losing the job. With sub-zero temperatures in the mountains, being placed in such circumstances would have led to feelings of loneliness among many people. In December, the leader of the group instructed the men to throw bundles of collected bamboo grass outside of the cleanup area within 20 meters from a road. The 15 or so workers each tossed away several bundles in the area, which had very little vehicle traffic. The man felt that many workers soon realized their efforts were not very productive, leading to a weakening of their ethics. He said when they tried to work carefully, others told him most of the leaves will end up flowing down rivers. He said he felt an invisible gap was developing between him and the other workers. Arrangements were made to meet the man on January 5th. He told reporters that he was born in Fukushima Prefecture, graduated from Waseda University in Tokyo, and had worked in construction and landscaping. He was hired for the decontamination work through a job placement center last October. A subcontractor told him the work would only involve bagging debris that had been left by the side of roads. But the work was much tougher, and he found himself gathering vegetation along steep slopes by the road. Even if the work was not properly completed, we were told to hurry up because there was no time, the man said. As long as the site looked all right, we moved on to the next location. The man showed a copy of his work contract which listed his daily wage as 11,000 yen, or approximately $125. There was no indication that he was given the yen in hazard pay to which he was entitled, which is an extra 10,000 yen. He said Environment Ministry officials never showed up at the work sites. Radiation levels returned even after we completed the work, so there was a sense that what we were doing was worthless, he said. There will be no end to the shoddy work even if oversight is strengthened. Another man in his 50s also described the futility. While we did try to scoop up leaves that had fallen into a river, most just float away. He said some bags filled with leaves were simply left in the river. Many workers lost all concerns about handling radioactive substances, the man said, adding that he feared he would become as insensitive as those around him. Another email was critical of the lack of local companies involved in the decontamination work. An executive with a Fukushima Prefecture construction company said he often observed vegetation flowing down rivers. Residents know that such leaves and vegetation will flow downstream, he wrote in an email. There was a problem with major construction companies that did not use local people. A man in his 60s said the workers should not be the target of criticism. Not all workers were being lax, the man wrote. They were doing their best, trying various methods, because there is no job manual. The man did say workers did not receive detailed training before starting this job. He also said contractors took part of the workers' pay for various reasons. It would be very difficult to accept criticism about shoddy work against people who were doing their best amid the terrible work conditions, the man wrote. There's no way that this environment can be restored to what it once was. And what they have been finding consistently is any areas that have been decontaminated show either at that time that the radiation is still present or it returns later. And as long as you have 3 meltdowns that are continuous and ongoing, you're going to have radioactive releases, especially like we saw a couple weeks ago when they had a big earthquake. It shook up the corium, rad levels shot up all around Fukushima. There's no way to clean it up. And unless you're going to take the first 6 inches of soil right after the accident, at this point, they've had heavy rains. Now they have the snowstorm. This stuff is going into the ground. It's getting into the aquifers. There's no way to fix it. And Arnie Gunderson had remarked in the past that what they're doing with all this ash from incineration and some of the tsunami debris that they're not burning and some of this environmental cleanup is they're putting it in these big garbage bags. And I think at the time he said they had an area that was 12 football fields in size that was half full, and that was like a year after it happened. So what are they going to do with all that waste? Or should they just use northern Japan as a waste ground where they need to put all this stuff? Even putting it in concrete is not going to help. It takes 100 years for concrete to cure, and that means that all the moisture is out of it. As long as there's moisture present, the rads are going to seep out of it. It's a terrible problem, and we're going to be interviewing people who might have answers of how to deal with this stuff. Now, closer to home, there has been some news about a plant in Florida and the plant in Pennsylvania. Let's see here. This was reported in Any News on January 14th. Analyst: Florida nuclear plant will likely be closed. Gunderson: the dominoes are starting to fall. The title of this was a posting from Fairwinds Energy Education. Repairs at 4 nuclear reactors are so expensive that they should not be restarted. Duke Energy is seriously considering pulling the plug on the Crystal River nuclear plant. Last week, we had a financial analyst at UBS suggest that Vermont Yankee didn't make economic sense. This week, we've got a financial analyst at another firm called Fitch, and he says the Crystal River plant will likely be closed because Duke can't make economic sense out of it. So the dominoes are starting to fall. We have Kewanee, which is in Wisconsin, which is shutting down in the Midwest because of financial reasons. And now we've got UBS analysts and Fitch analysts also claiming it makes no economic sense to keep other nuclear plants running. And this article appeared in the Seattle PI Monday, January 14th. From Berwick, Pennsylvania, federal regulators began examining a nuclear plant in northeastern Pennsylvania on Monday, following 3 unexpected shutdowns, but the facility's operator said that it is safe and stable. A 3-member team from the NRC arrived at the Susquehanna power plant near Berwick to look into operator performance, equipment reliability, and decision-making, the agency said. The move comes after 3 unplanned reactor shutdowns between November 9th and December 19th. None of the incidents posed a safety threat, said Joe Scopoletti, a spokesman for the Allentown-based PPL Corporation, which operates Susquehanna. We did a thorough investigation of the causes of the shutdowns, he said, noting the company is cooperating with the inspection. The most recent shutdown occurred after a valve failed to open during a plant startup, temporarily interrupting the water supply to one of the facility's 2 reactors. The November 9th shutdown was attributed to problems with a computer system that monitors water levels, and a December 16th malfunction happened during routine valve testing on Unit 2's main turbine system. Neil Sheehan, a spokesman for the nuclear agency, said it's not clear how long the inspection will take. A report containing findings and recommendations is due 45 days after the inspection is completed. Recommendations could include increased oversight. He noted Susquehanna's Unit 1 reactor is already under a higher level of oversight because of a flooding event in 2010. A much bigger concern, though, is, of course, cancer clusters and disease that has been documented around numerous nuke plants, and you have to wonder how the flu clusters will appear around them also. In fact, last Tuesday we talked about the flu epidemic, and we shared an article where Major Fox, who was interviewed on Thursday, was interviewed by Leon Smith. And I have a flu update to read to you in a moment from New Scientist, but I came across this article from the Orlando Sentinel, and this was published in 2006. By Joseph Mangano. And at that time, Florida was thinking of building new reactors. Now, of course, they're going to possibly be shutting down Crystal River. Progress Energy's plan to build new nuclear reactors in Levy County would imperil public health. Despite company assurances that reactors provide clean energy, the fact is that over 100 radioactive chemicals are routinely emitted from reactors into the air and water. Now, that's not plants that are having problems. That's just normal operation. These chemicals enter the body through breathing, food, and water. They can cause cancer and are especially toxic to infants and children. Since 1977, the Crystal River nuclear reactor is operated just 7 miles from the proposed new plant. Before Crystal River opened, the county's cancer rate was 18% below the U.S., but since it has been 1% above the nation. Especially large rises have occurred for radiation-sensitive cancers such as leukemia, lymphoma, and breast cancer. The biggest cancer problem in the county is that it does not actually affect the large elderly population. Since Crystal River opened, Citrus County's death rate for 20 to 54-year-olds has been a staggering 49% higher than the U.S. for cancer, but 26% lower for all other causes. Something is causing lots of local young adults to die only of cancer. And at that time, he was recommending more studies be done. As far as the flu goes, I hope you guys are wearing your masks. If you haven't gone out to get one, you can get a box of 25 N95 masks for $23 approximately at your local hardware store. Price that out. CVS even sells them where they have kind of like small hardware supplies. They'll have like a package of 3 masks for like $4. This is from New Scientist Health, updated on January 14th. This is what's going on with the flu. New information shows the rate of hospitalization has gone up to 13 per 100,000, suggesting the illness could be somewhat more severe this year. Case numbers, however, are falling. Flu season has come early to the U.S. this winter, and hospitals in many cities are overwhelmed by the surge in cases. Boston has declared a public health emergency, and Google Flu Trends, which monitors the prevalence of certain search terms to track the disease, shows the U.S. topping the world. Ominous news coverage shows emergency rooms overflowing. Just how worried should you be? What is going on? The flu season in the Northern Hemisphere falls anytime between October and May, but usually peaks in February. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, flu activity in the U.S. started picking up in November and hit its stride in December. That is hardly unprecedented. In 2010, the UK's flu season also started in December. Last year's U.S. flu season, which started in March, was very mild. This year, the viruses are largely the same, although according to the CDC, their prevalence is different. A strain that was common last season is rare this time around, for example. However, the disease they cause seems no worse. Both this year and last, around 8 per 100,000 cases are severe enough to need hospitalization, although this year's figures might be affected by a time lag in reporting hospitalized cases. Reports Lone Simonson of George Washington University, who currently has the flu. Is this really the worst flu season in years then? Hardly, according to CDC records. So far, the rise in cases looks a lot like the 2007 to 2008 season, which was classed as moderately severe, and nothing like the first wave of H1N1 swine flu pandemic of 2009. Case numbers could keep climbing, but so far, seasoned flu watchers are not betting on anything unusual. Severe flu cases cause a lot more deaths than what we have seen so far this year, says flu epidemiologist Mike Olsterham of the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis. So why do things seem so bad? One reason is that case numbers have risen fast. The U.S. calculates those numbers by monitoring cases that turn up at designated sentinel clinics across the country. Last year, the number of cases the clinic saw peaked at a little more than half the number that they are seeing now over roughly the same time. That doesn't mean the total number of cases by the epidemic's end will necessarily be greater this year than in previous years. However, cases could fall off quickly, or they may not. Rule number 1 is never predict how a season will play out until it's over, warns Jake Dunning at the Imperial College of London. Regardless of how the rest of the flu season turns out, the initial sharp increase in cases causes its own problems, overwhelming healthcare systems for a time and causing, knock on wood, problems as other patients are put on hold. Is that why we are seeing beds in hallways and tents outside of U.S. hospitals? Yes, in previous decades, hospitals kept excess capacity, so if there was any overflow, it showed things were really bad. Now he said financial cutbacks mean there is no such surge capacity. Every hospital bed is filled 24/7. Think about that for a second. So overflow happens more readily. I saw, I think it was in Pennsylvania, that they were actually putting up tents and so forth outside the hospital to have cases there to deal with their overflow. Is there little cause for concern then? Not so fast, when the flu season is really showing its effects to bolster the U.S.'s capacity to respond to public health disasters. Most hospitals have been hit by financial cutbacks. Let's see. The U.S. Institute of Medicine's Forum on Public Health Preparedness for Catastrophes is meeting this week to discuss how to improve hospitals' preparedness for disasters, or, says Herman, just the flu season. And I received a number of emails after Tuesday's show about Tamiflu, and I had shared a little story where I had gone to our local pharmacy to see if they had it for my daughter, And a bunch of people emailed me and said, you know how bad Tamiflu is, right? And I do. In fact, I was really against her getting it, which we couldn't do anyway because they were sold out and back ordered for weeks. But she's 22. She insisted on it after 3 days of not getting any better. I did pull up an article this morning from the FDA that warned about suicide, delirium, and other psychiatric problems associated with Tamiflu, and this has been going on for a while. In fact, this article was from November 17th of 2006. The FDA reacted to reports of self-injury, suicide, and delirium, adding a warning to the label on the popular antiviral drug Tamiflu. The FDA and the drug's manufacturer, Hoffman La Roche Incorporated, did so after reports surfaced in Japan of children who took the drug and then exhibited psychiatric symptoms, including confusion and delirium. Tamiflu is one of 4 treatments for seasonal flu in the U.S. It's usually taken to prevent or lessen the severity of the virus. In a detailed report prepared by the FDA's Division of Drug Risk Evaluation for its Pediatric Advisory Committee, staff from the FDA described some of the cases in which otherwise normal children, most under 17, exhibited bizarre psychiatric behavior shortly after taking Tamiflu. Side effects occurred usually within a day of taking the drug and included panic attacks, delusions, delirium, convulsions, depression, loss of consciousness, and in some cases suicide. Reported cases from the report include 3 people who fell to their deaths after taking the drug, including a 14-year-old boy who climbed atop the railing of his family's condominium. The report also tells the story of an 8-year-old boy who, after taking a single dose of Tamiflu, wouldn't answer to his own name and was growling. Another case involved a 14-year-old girl struck with paranoia who swore someone was watching her from outside her home and that her salad had been poisoned. The report also cites 2 men that fell to their deaths after taking Tamiflu. One of them left a suicide note. None of the cases had any reported psychological or neurological problems before taking the medication. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you guys. Just as a reminder, right after the show from 2 to 4 on Blog Talk Radio, Patrick Penry will be discussing his analysis of the NRC Freedom of Information Act documents from the Fukushima disaster. And Lauren Murray will be on GLP tonight from the Raw feed on Blog Talk Radio talking about population control. And one thing that you can't seem to turn on the news without hearing about is gun control right now, ammo shortages, or Sandy Hook. And Anderson Cooper gave a very derogatory speech about crazy conspiracy theorists the other day following a Florida professor's article about the inconsistencies in the media regarding Sandy Hook. And one man's response to Anderson Cooper was going absolutely viral on YouTube yesterday. So in case you missed it, we're going to play it for you now. Ian has to cover his ears because there's lots of profanity.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. I was going to do a blog post on the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting and the Newtown massacre up there in Connecticut, but I have seen several very good blogs that have done some in-depth reporting on this, so I don't think it's necessary for me to do so. But I did want to comment on this in light of some commentary from the news media, which has put out on various shows bemoaning the crazy, insensitive, wacky conspiracy theories around the Sandy Hook shooting. From all of the crazy, wacky, out-of-control conspiracy theorists who are coming up with these bizarre, outlandish claims about this terrible, awful tragedy. Well, I have this to say to the news media that would put this story out there and try to belittle people who are trying to get to the basis of what exactly happened, and who exactly did what, and to try and resolve some of the immense inconsistencies in the story that we have been told. So this is for the news media that is going to bemoan and castigate conspiracy theorists for coming up with outlandish ideas about the terrible tragedy at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut. No one on the internet would bother to write a blog post about anything that happens in the world and try to dig to the bottom of the fucking truth if you motherfuckers in the fucking media would do the goddamn job you're fucking supposed to do. Can you ask a motherfucking question, you fucking shitbags? Can you fucking ask one fucking thing? Can you get the answer to one fucking consistency? You motherfucking moronic dirtbag shitheads! There wouldn't be anybody on the internet asking questions about who was the guy taken out of the fucking woods. Can somebody tell me who the guy was that was arrested in the fucking woods? You people will not even ask the motherfucking question. And you try to call yourselves motherfucking journalists. Shove it up your collective fucking asses. What about the other guy that was chased through the woods and seen from a helicopter? What about the inconsistencies with the car and the motherfucking assault rifle? Quote unquote. You fucking asshole motherfuckers. So before you have your little fucking stint on your little shitty fucking media program and call conspiracy theory every time you see somebody digging around a story to try to figure out what the fucking truth is, why don't you try doing your motherfucking jobs instead of being the dirtbag fucking ass-licking motherfuckers that you are? Until then, shut your motherfucking collective useless fucking mouths. Thank you. Good night.
Words are flowing out like endless rain into a paper cup. They slither wide.